Chapter 1. The Inheritance of Dreams. I had always been the kind of person who believed that the universe was full of possibilities, full of untold adventures and unexplored worlds. Growing up, I had spent countless hours listening to my grandfather's stories about space exploration, the galaxies he'd traveled, and the ships he'd built. He was no ordinary man. He was a legend in the small but thriving community of engineers, a master shipwright who had single-handedly crafted some of the most advanced ships in the galaxy, ships that had become icons in the world of space travel. His workshop, a sprawling garage filled with half-finished projects, rare parts, and salvaged materials, had always been a second home to me, a place where I could learn, tinker, and imagine a future that was boundless and free. There was something intoxicating about that workshop, something magical about the way he would look at a pile of scrap metal and see a spaceship, a new form of transportation that could transcend the boundaries of the known universe. I spent my childhood fascinated by the hum of machinery, the hiss of hydraulic systems, and the occasional flash of welding sparks lighting up the dimly lit room. My grandfather had always told me that I had the same spark of creativity and ingenuity that he did, that I was destined to carry on his legacy. He believed in me more than anyone else ever had, but it was hard to believe it myself when I was just a kid who had only ever tinkered with basic engines, never really knowing if I could build anything worthwhile. But his belief in me became the foundation of a dream of building a ship of my own, something that would carry me through the stars, just like my grandfather had done so many years ago. And though I had no idea at the time, that dream was about to come true in a way I never could have imagined. It all began when the letter arrived. I had just graduated from college with a degree in engineering, my head filled with hopes of one day creating my own warp cruiser, a ship that would push the boundaries of space travel. I had been working odd jobs for a few years, doing everything from repairing engines on cargo freighters to tinkering with old fighter ships for various clients. But my heart wasn't in it. I wanted to build something greater, something that would carry me beyond the limits of Earth's atmosphere, something that would let me chart my own course through the stars. It was during one of these late-night work sessions, my mind buzzing with ideas for the next big project, when the letter arrived. It came by courier, sealed in a thick, wax-like envelope. The moment I saw it, I knew it was important. The seal was unmistakable, my grandfather's signature, his unique insignia that he had used on everything from blueprints to shipping invoices. I had seen that insignia 1,000 times growing up, but never like this. The envelope felt heavier in my hands than it should have. And as I slowly broke the seal, a deep, gnawing feeling began to settle in my stomach. I opened the letter with trembling fingers and read the contents, my eyes widening with each word. Dear your name, it is with great pride that I leave you the garage, all its contents, and the last of my unfinished projects. You have always shown an exceptional ability to understand the workings of ships and the engines that power them. I trust you will find the right path and take the mantle of creation with a clear heart. This is more than just a legacy, my dear. This is an invitation to step into the shoes of the one who first dreamed beyond the stars. I hope you'll take it. The key to the garage is in the attached keychain. I expect you'll make good use of it. With all my love, Grandpa. I sat there in stunned silence for what felt like hours, staring at the letter, trying to process what I had just read. My grandfather had passed away quietly several months ago, an event that had left a hole in my heart, a void that I wasn't sure could ever be filled. He had been my rock, the one person who believed in me when the world had its doubts. But the letter, the garage, the projects. I was suddenly thrust into the realization that I had inherited not only his legacy, but his unfinished dreams, and a chance to finally live the life I had always imagined. The thought of stepping into his shoes, of taking over his workshop, made my pulse race with a mix of excitement and fear. What had he left me? What kind of project had he been working on before he passed? I grabbed the keychain attached to the letter, my fingers trembling as I held it. The key was worn with age, its edges smoothed by years of use. It was simple, unassuming, but I knew that it was the key to everything I had ever wanted. The garage, the ship, the future. I wasted no time. I packed a bag with essentials, grabbed my tools, and headed straight for the location of my grandfather's workshop. When I arrived, I stood outside the large, metal door for a moment, taking in the sight of the building that had shaped so much of my life. The paint was chipped, the structure worn by years of weather and neglect, but it was still standing, still strong, just like the man who had built it. I ran my fingers over the door's cold surface and took a deep breath. This was it. This was where everything would change. I inserted the key into the lock, the metal scraping softly as it turned. The door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit interior of the workshop. The familiar smell of old engines, burnt metal, and engine oil filled my nostrils, and for a moment, I felt like my grandfather was still there, watching over me. I stepped inside, the soft echo of my footsteps the only sound breaking the silence of the room. The garage was filled with old tools, spare parts, and half-finished ships, each one a testament to my grandfather's work and his passion for space travel. But it wasn't the tools or the materials that caught my attention, it was the project at the back of the room. There, under a large tarp, was a ship. Not just any ship, but a sleek, unfinished warp cruiser, my grandfather's last creation, and the key to everything. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly approached it, pulling the tarp away to reveal the magnificent structure beneath. The ship was beautiful, even in its unfinished state. The sleek, aerodynamic curves, the powerful engines designed for deep space travel, and the advanced propulsion system, it was everything I had ever dreamed of building. My grandfather had been working on this ship when he passed, and now it was mine. All mine. But as I stood there, staring at the ship, my heart filled with a sense of wonder and trepidation. Could I finish what he had started? Could I bring this ship to life? I had always dreamed of building my own warp cruiser, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. For the next few days, I immersed myself in the ship's blueprints and systems, poring over the schematics my grandfather had left behind. I found a hidden compartment with his notes, a detailed set of instructions for finishing the project. My grandfather had left me everything I needed, the plans, the parts, and the tools. It was like he had known I would need this, that I would be the one to finish what he had started. I was overwhelmed by the responsibility, but there was no turning back. I couldn't let his legacy die in the dusty corners of this garage. I had to complete it. But as I began to work on the ship, something unexpected happened. I received a message in official communication from the Galactic Empire. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake, a random solicitation for business or a notice about regulations. But when I opened the message, my heart dropped. Dear, we have become aware of the ship you are currently working on. It has come to our attention that this particular vessel is of significant interest to the Galactic Empire. We request that you cease any further work on it immediately. The ship will be requisitioned by Imperial forces. Failure to comply with this directive will result in severe consequences. Sincerely, the Galactic Emperor's office. I sat frozen, staring at the message in disbelief. The Galactic Empire? They wanted my grandfather's ship? What could they possibly want with it? I had barely even begun to work on it, and now, just as I had started to live my dream, I was being told to stop. The weight of the message pressed down on me, and I felt a surge of anger and fear. This was my inheritance, my future, and they were trying to take it away. But I couldn't let that happen. I made a decision then, right there in my grandfather's workshop. I would finish the ship, no matter the cost. The Galactic Empire had no idea who they were dealing with. The legacy my grandfather had left me wasn't just a ship, it was a challenge. And I wasn't about to back down. The universe was full of obstacles, but this was my moment. My chance to take control of my own destiny. The Stellar Voyager would fly, and no one, not even the Galactic Emperor, could stop me. As the days wore on, the weight of the inheritance settled more heavily on me. My grandfather's ship, his masterpiece, was far more than a simple mechanical project. It was a legacy, a testament to his skill and passion for space travel, a final challenge that I had to take on. But as the hours stretched into days, the questions began to pile up. What had he been working on? Why had the Galactic Empire taken such an interest in the ship? What was it about this vessel that made it so significant? I had never been one to shy away from a challenge, and this was no different. I dove into the blueprints my grandfather had left behind with a fervor, studying every detail, trying to piece together the puzzle of the Stellar Voyager. It was clear that my grandfather had designed this ship for something far beyond what I had initially imagined. It wasn't just about comfort or speed. It was about power, about technology that had the potential to change the way humanity interacted with the universe. The ship was built to travel faster than anything that currently existed, equipped with a warp drive system that seemed far ahead of its time. But it wasn't just the technology that was impressive, it was the sheer scale of the ship, the advanced propulsion systems, and the internal design that had been so carefully thought out. Every system was interwoven with the next, creating a machine that felt almost alive, as though it had a soul of its own. The more I worked on it, the more I realized just how much my grandfather had poured into this ship. It was his life's work, and now it was mine. I felt a deep responsibility to finish it, to bring it to life the way he had always intended. But there was a problem. I didn't have all the resources I needed. The parts one had were limited, and many of them were old, outdated, and difficult to work with. Some of the advanced technology required components that were rare, nearly impossible to find on this side of the galaxy. I would need to venture into the more dangerous, unexplored corners of space to retrieve them. But it wasn't just the parts that concerned me, it was the looming shadow of the Galactic Empire. Their message had been clear. They wanted the ship, and they were prepared to take it by force if necessary. They didn't care about my grandfather's legacy. They didn't care about my dreams. They wanted the ship, and they were willing to do whatever it took to claim it. I had thought that I was prepared for this. I had grown up listening to my grandfather's stories of adventure and rebellion, of facing down powerful forces and fighting for what was right. But now that the reality had set in, the fear began to creep in. What if I wasn't enough? What if I couldn't finish the ship in time? What if the Empire sent their agents after me? I spent every waking hour working on the Stellar Voyager, not only repairing it, but making it my own. I made small changes to the interior, adding features that would make it more personal, more suited to my style. It was no longer just my grandfather's ship, it was mine now. But even as I worked, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of danger. Every time I went out to gather parts or materials, I felt like I was being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire's agents were closing in on me, that they were just waiting for the right moment to strike. The thought made my blood run cold, but I couldn't stop. I had come too far to turn back. As I put the final touches on the ship's exterior, the reality of what I was doing hit me. The Stellar Voyager was no longer just a dream. It was a real, tangible thing, an incredible, powerful ship that had the potential to change the way humanity traveled through the stars. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. I decided to reach out to old friends, people who had worked with my grandfather over the years, who had helped him when things got tough. One of them was Ria, a former military strategist who had known my grandfather during his time as a freelance contractor. She was tough, resourceful, and more than capable of handling herself in a fight. I knew she could help me defend the ship, and she had the expertise I lacked in navigating dangerous situations. Another person I contacted was Dr. Barron, an old engineer who had worked alongside my grandfather in the early days of his career. Dr. Barron had retired years ago, but he still had the knowledge and experience needed to help me finish the ship's warp drive system. I knew that with their help, I could complete the ship and escape the Empire's grasp. But even as I made these plans, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The Empire was already on its way, and once they found out about the Stellar Voyager, they would stop at nothing to seize it. The decision was made. I would finish the ship, and I would fight for my grandfather's legacy. I wasn't just building a ship, I was building a future. A future where I could choose my own path, free from the Empire's control. Chapter 2. Resistance in the Shadows. The days that followed were a blur of activity and constant tension. I had sent messages to both Ria and Dr. Barron, outlining the situation and asking for their help. Ria had responded almost immediately, and within hours, she had arrived at the garage, her presence as commanding as ever. She was tall, with short-cropped dark hair and a no-nonsense attitude that made it clear she wasn't here to waste time. When she saw the Stellar Voyager for the first time, her eyes lit up with recognition. "This is it, huh?" she asked, her voice low as she walked around the ship. "Your grandfather really outdid himself." I nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. "It's all I have left of him," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And now it's up to me to finish it." Ria glanced over at me, her face softening for a moment. "You're not alone in this, you know. We'll get it done." She reached out, clapping me on the shoulder with a strength that almost knocked me off balance. "But we need to move fast. The Empire won't give up easily." I knew she was right. The clock was ticking. The Empire's agents were out there, and every day that passed brought them closer to discovering the ship. I had to be ready, and I had to finish the repairs as quickly as possible. Dr. Barron arrived a few days later, his weathered face betraying his age. He was a wiry man, with graying hair and glasses perched on the tip of his nose. Despite his age, his hands were steady as he began to examine the ship's warp drive system, muttering to himself as he ran calculations and made adjustments. "This is ambitious," he said, looking up at me with a bemused expression. Your grandfather had big plans for this ship. Bigger than anything I've ever seen. It's a marvel, truly. I watched as Dr. Barron worked, his fingers flying over the controls with ease, fixing systems that had been long forgotten. Every adjustment he made brought the ship one step closer to being fully functional, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. My grandfather had built something incredible, something that could change the course of history. And with Dr. Barron's expertise, we were close to making it a reality. Rhea, on the other hand, was busy preparing for the inevitable confrontation. She had set up defensive systems around the garage and began training me in basic combat tactics, just in case the Empire's agents decided to pay us a visit. I wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea of fighting, but Rhea was right. If the Empire wanted the ship, they would stop at nothing to get it. We had to be ready for anything. As the days passed, I grew more anxious. Every time I stepped outside, I felt like someone was watching me. The feeling of being hunted hung over me like a dark cloud, and I couldn't shake the sense of impending danger. But we couldn't afford to waste any more time. The ship was nearly ready. We just needed a few more parts, and then we could get off the planet and into the stars where the Empire couldn't reach us. But then, the worst possible thing happened. One evening, as the sun began to set, we heard the unmistakable hum of an Imperial ship in the distance. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was overhead. My heart sank. They had found us. The low hum of the Imperial ship grew louder, its unmistakable thrum echoing through the garage as it hovered overhead. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked at Rhea and Dr. Barron. There was no mistaking it now. The Empire had found us. I could feel my hands shake with anxiety, but Rhea's presence steadied me. Her eyes were cold, calculating, as she scanned the surroundings. We need to move fast, Rhea said, her voice low and steady. She didn't seem surprised, but I could tell she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Get to the back garage. I'll take care of the front. Dr. Barron, stay here and keep working on the warp drive. If they breach the door, we need to be ready to fly, and we need to be out of here in seconds. Dr. Barron didn't hesitate. His expression hardened as he nodded in agreement. Understood. I'll finalize the systems. We can make a quick escape if the engines are functioning. Without another word, Rhea moved to the front of the garage, slipping through the narrow back passage to take up her defensive position. I followed her orders, heading for the back of the building where my grandfather had stored additional supplies, hoping to find anything useful in case we needed to fight. My mind raced as I quickly sifted through piles of tools, spare parts, and boxes filled with items I had never fully examined. I was torn between the urgency of preparation and the anxiety coursing through me, knowing that at any moment, we could be discovered. I paused, staring at the wall of scrap parts and wondering what the Empire's forces would do when they got here. Would they try to take the ship by force? Would they come in blazing? Or would they try a more subtle approach, infiltrating the garage in the dead of night, looking for weaknesses? My grandfather's garage, with all its creaks and rust, was a poor place to hide, but it was the only place I had left to rely on. There was a loud bang from outside, followed by a deep rumble that shook the walls. The ship was hovering closer now, and I could see the flashing lights through the narrow cracks in the walls. I quickly grabbed a few tools from the table, nothing heavy or too obvious, and stuffed them into my bag. I checked the secondary weapons stash that my grandfather had kept hidden behind a panel and found the plasma pistols and a couple of stun grenades he had left for emergencies. I wasn't a fighter. I was a builder, a dreamer, someone who had always preferred to solve problems with ingenuity rather than violence. But now, I had no choice. Rhea's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and decisive. They're moving in. Get to the ship now. I didn't hesitate. I ran back to the garage door, sprinting through the shadows, heart racing in my chest as I looked back one last time at the ship's unfinished frame. My grandfather had always dreamed of flying beyond the stars, and now, it seemed, his dream was about to be challenged by forces far beyond my control. I had to finish what he had started. I had to get the Stellar Voyager off the ground. I reached the ship and hopped into the cockpit, fingers flying over the controls. My stomach tightened with each system I activated. The engines were primed and ready to go, but there was still the issue of the fuel systems. If the Empire had already compromised the perimeter, there was no way we'd get out without some kind of fight. I tried to connect to the docking clamps, but they were jammed. My pulse quickened as I heard the first voices coming from outside, Imperial officers and soldiers, shouting as they moved closer. They were here. They knew we had the ship, and they weren't going to let it slip through their fingers. Dr. Barron's voice came through the comms, urgent. The warp drive is almost operational. It's going to need a bit more time to stabilize, but we can take off within minutes if you can clear the clamps. Ria's voice followed, calm and confident. Hold tight. We'll buy you the time you need. Just get the engines running. I cursed under my breath as I toggled the ship's control panels, feeling the tight pressure of time pulling at me. My fingers moved faster, a blur over the interface, rerouting power to the thrusters and activating the escape thrusters in the rear. The Stellar Voyager responded with a low hum as the engines rumbled to life. I could feel the vibration of the ship beneath me as it began to lift off, but the clamps held firm, preventing us from fully taking off. I gritted my teeth, frustrated, my eyes darting around the cockpit as I searched for a way to override the docking system. I tried everything I could think of, but the clock was ticking. The sound of boots marching across the floor outside grew louder, and I could see the outlines of soldiers appearing outside the windows. I had no more time. Desperation surged through me as I activated the emergency override. With a loud clang, the clamps released, sending a jolt through the ship as it lurched into the air. We were free. The moment the Stellar Voyager was airborne, the view of the galaxy beyond stretched out before me, dark and vast. The lights of the nearby planet flickered below as I pushed the ship to full throttle, feeling the power surge through the ship's systems. But as I steered the ship upward, preparing to make a jump to warp speed, I saw the enemy ships in the distance, moving fast, preparing to cut off our escape. We're not done yet. Ria's voice came through the comms again. They've got reinforcements. I looked at the ship's radar and saw that Ria was right. The Empire's forces were in pursuit. They were fast, and they were coming for us. I wasn't ready for a battle. I wasn't even sure I could outmaneuver them. But I didn't have a choice. If we were going to survive this, we had to make it out of the system and fast. I reached for the ship's navigational system, pulling up coordinates for a nearby asteroid belt that could serve as a temporary hiding spot. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the only option I had. I set the ship's trajectory and prepared for the jump to light speed. Hold on tight. I muttered to myself as I slammed my hand down on the warp drive activation switch. Chapter 3. Into the Unknown. The jump to warp speed was a blur. The ship vibrated violently as the engines roared to life, and for a few heart-stopping seconds, I felt like I was being torn apart. The stars outside the cockpit twisted and stretched into streaks of light as the ship surged forward, hurtling faster than anything I had ever experienced. The suddenness of it all made my head spin, and I had to fight to keep my focus as the ship tore through space, leaving the Empire's ships far behind. When the ship dropped back to sublight speeds, I exhaled a long, relieved breath. My hands were still trembling as I gripped the controls, but we were free, at least for now. We had escaped the Empire's grasp, but I knew this wasn't over. They would come after us. They would stop at nothing to claim the Stellar Voyager, and once they realized what it was capable of, they would send everything they had to hunt us down. I wasn't sure how long we had, but it wasn't much. I glanced at the navigation screen, setting the course toward the asteroid belt I had picked out. It was a dangerous place, full of debris and unstable rock formations, but it would give us a few hours to regroup, repair the ship, and make a plan. The Stellar Voyager had been through a lot, and I needed time to fully assess the damage. But I also knew that time was something we didn't have in abundance. Ria's voice crackled through the comms. Nice flying, kid. But we're not in the clear yet. I'll get to work on reinforcing the systems while you keep us moving. We've got some time, but not much. I nodded, even though I knew she couldn't see me. I activated the ship's internal systems to begin the diagnostics, watching the data stream across the console. The warp drive was functioning, but there were multiple power fluctuations in the auxiliary engines. The hull had suffered some damage during the escape, and the shields weren't holding as strongly as they should. Baron, I called over the comms, knowing that he would be busy with the ship's internal systems. I'm here. His voice came back, tired but steady. I'll take care of the warp core stabilizers. You focus on getting us to safety. We've got a few hours before we need to jump again. I set the ship's course and began to navigate the asteroid belt, keeping the ship steady as we weaved through the massive rocks. The Stellar Voyager handled surprisingly well for a ship that was still so far from complete. I couldn't help but feel a growing connection to it, like the ship itself was beginning to understand that I was its captain now. Together, we were going to face whatever came next. but I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey was only just beginning. The Galactic Empire would never let go of their pursuit, and we would have to fight harder, smarter, and faster to stay one step ahead. The stars ahead were vast and unknown, but there was no turning back. This was my grandfather's legacy, and now it was mine to protect. The asteroid belt loomed ahead like a vast maze of floating rock, the massive chunks of rock tumbling slowly through the black void of space. The stellar Voyager swerved and dipped, navigating through the jagged obstacles with precision, the hum of the engines now steady as the ship followed my every command. Despite the ship's obvious flaws, it had become an extension of myself, and I could feel every adjustment, every turn, as if it were my own body moving through the cosmos. The belt was dense, but it was the best chance we had to buy some time and give Dr. Barron and Rhea the opportunity to stabilize the ship. The silence in the cockpit was thick, except for the low thrumming of the engines and the occasional beep of the control systems. I had my hands firmly on the control panel, eyes darting from one screen to the next, ensuring that we didn't hit any stray debris. The stellar Voyager had taken some damage during the escape, but the ship was tough. I could feel it. It had been built for this. My grandfather had designed it to withstand more than anything I could throw at it. But I wasn't naive. The longer we stayed here, the more likely it was that the Empire's ships would catch up to us. Rhea's voice broke through the comms. We've got about an hour before we'll have to move again. I'm reinforcing the shield generators, but you need to keep an eye on the navigation. The longer we linger, the more chances we have of drawing attention. I nodded, though she couldn't see me, and focused harder, weaving the ship through narrow gaps between the asteroid clusters. The ship groaned under the strain as I pushed it harder than I ever had, but it held. The ship was proving itself to be more resilient than I had thought. Every turn I made, every cautious but quick maneuver, felt like a victory. We moved deeper into the belt, and I kept us on course toward a small hidden station that my grandfather had frequented. It wasn't much, but it had everything we needed: fuel, parts, and a bit of a hideout that could help us lay low for a while. If we were lucky, the Empire wouldn't be able to track us there, and we could finally get some rest, reassess, and plan our next move. But luck wasn't something I could count on. I had learned that lesson long ago. The Empire's reach was vast, and no hiding place would remain hidden forever. But for now, it was our best shot. "Baron, how's the core?" I asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it from him. "The warp core's operational, but it's running hot. We need to make sure we don't push it too hard. I'll work on it as best I can, but don't make any sudden jumps until I give the go-ahead." I grimaced, knowing that our situation was becoming more complicated by the minute. The idea of getting back into warp space was tempting, escaping at full speed, leaving the Empire's forces behind, but I couldn't risk it. Not yet. I had to play it safe. If the core failed, we would be stranded. And the stellar Voyager was far from being a defensible position. "Got it," I said, focusing on the task at hand. "We're still on course. Just keep the ship intact for now. We'll get out of here." Rhea's voice came back, sharper now, as she surveyed the systems in the back. "I don't like how close we're cutting it, but we don't have a choice. I'll be ready with weapons if they get too close. Let's hope it doesn't come to that," I muttered under my breath, turning the ship ever so slightly to avoid a particularly large asteroid. The tension was palpable, and I could feel the sweat on my palms as I adjusted the ship's speed and angle, trying to keep us from looking like a stationary target for too long. Just as I thought we might be in the clear, a warning light flashed on the dashboard. The radar lit up, showing multiple ships entering the belt at the far end. They were Imperial cruisers. "We've got company," I said through gritted teeth. "Get ready for evasive maneuvers." Chapter 4. The Final Escape. The atmosphere in the cockpit shifted immediately as the enemy ships appeared on the radar. I could hear Rhea's breath steady through the comms, and Dr. Barron's voice was focused, though strained. The Empire was on our tail, and they weren't here to negotiate. They were here to capture the stellar Voyager and, by extension, me. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I quickly mapped out an escape route, weaving through the asteroid belt, using the jagged rocks as cover. But the Imperial ships were relentless. Their sensors were better, their tracking systems more advanced. They had us cornered. I could feel the weight of the decision before I made it. We had no choice but to engage. "We're going to have to fight our way out," I said, my voice steady even though my pulse was racing. "Rhea, prep the weapons. Baron, keep the core steady. We need all systems working at max efficiency." Rhea's voice came back, confident despite the situation. "You get us through this, and I'll make sure we make it out alive." I gripped the controls tightly as I saw the enemy ships closing in. The Stellar Voyager wasn't built for combat. It wasn't equipped with weapons that could take on a full Imperial cruiser. But we had one advantage: speed. I kicked the engines into high gear and began to weave the ship between asteroids, pushing the Stellar Voyager to its limits. The vibrations under my feet told me the ship was protesting, but it held strong. The Imperial ships, despite their superior weapons, couldn't keep up with the agility of the Stellar Voyager. They tried to close the gap, but we were faster, more unpredictable. I could hear the sound of blaster fire pinging off the hull, the bright flashes lighting up the cockpit as the shields absorbed the shots. But it wasn't just about outrunning them. It was about surviving long enough to get the jump to warp. I watched as the ship's system strained, power flickering on the console as I desperately kept the ship steady. Rhea fired back, managing to disable one of the enemy ship's auxiliary power units, causing them to lose ground. But there were still 2 ships behind us, gaining fast. We were running out of options. "Baron, now would be a good time for that warp jump," I said, urgency creeping into my voice. "We're ready," he replied, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "Do it." I slammed my hand down on the warp drive control, praying that the system would hold. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, with a surge of energy that rattled the ship, the stars outside the viewport elongated, streaking into the iconic white lines of warp speed. We were free. The Imperial ships were left behind, scattered in the wake of our escape, and as the Stellar Voyager hurtled through space at faster-than-light speeds, I allowed myself a moment of relief. We had done it. But I knew this wasn't the end. The Empire would be back. They would keep searching, keep hunting us, and there would be more challenges ahead. I glanced out the viewport, looking at the infinite stretches of space beyond. There was still so much I didn't know about the Stellar Voyager, about what it could do, about its true potential. But there was also so much I didn't know about the Empire and the forces that sought to control the universe. Whatever happened next, though, I was ready. I wasn't just the grandson of a great shipwright, I was a pilot now, and the Stellar Voyager was mine. And together, we would face whatever the stars threw at us. The adventure had only just begun.